Ryanair predicts stronger bookings over the summer despite tough industry conditions and confusion over travel restrictions. And tackling the pingdemic, businesses face disruption to supply chains despite government efforts to free up critical workers. Hello and a very warm welcome. This is World Business Report and I'm Sally Bundock. And we start with Ryanair, the no-frills carrier. It's just released its latest earnings. And as I've just mentioned, it's predicting it should see stronger bookings over the summer despite the tough industry conditions. So Europe's biggest budget carrier raised its full year forecast but reported an after-tax loss of €273 million for the 3 months to the end of June. The Irish airline expects to fly 9 million passengers in the month of July and then a further 10 million in August. And that's down from a pre-COVID-19 peak of 149 million. Well, let's discuss all of this with John Grant, Director at aviation consultancy OAG. Good morning to you, John. So you've been looking at Ryanair's numbers. How are they doing given the challenges?
They're doing better than probably anyone else in Europe at the moment. They have a very simple model, a very low cost base, and they've got literally hundreds of bases all around Europe. So they are completely de-risked and not vulnerable to just one government minister closing a country down again. So they're doing better than very, very many of their competitors. And
also as well, correct me if I'm wrong, did they reduce their fleet quite a bit or not to, raise cash? For example, I know EasyJet did that, but of course when all the passengers come back again, you need all your planes.
You do. They've adopted a different strategy to EasyJet, so they kept most of their fleet flying, although not flying very many hours a day. But they've also got the 737 MAX coming into their fleet. They have 6 already in operation, 210 on order. So, they've got capacity coming in and they continue to grow and grow. They are the most resilient airline in Europe. Their results reflect that, and they will be the fastest to return to profitability, I have no doubt.
Now, Michael O'Leary, Chief Executive, has been very critical of the UK government and its handling of the travel lists. It's kind of spearheading a group of leading travel businesses who are launching legal action against the UK government. Where is all that at the moment?
Well, that's been thrown out, unfortunately, because, quite frankly, the government has been woeful in the United Kingdom, lack of leadership, no understanding or empathy with the travel industry, thousands of jobs at risk. And yet, this is an island economy. We can't all walk on water like you and I can, Sally. So, it's going to be very difficult. And the government, quite frankly, has let the industry down.
In terms of, the traffic light system, there's so much anxiety among travellers now. I mean, Ryanair saying we could have a decent summer, but actually, do you think they're being over-optimistic? I know so many who say to me, look, we're just not risking going anywhere because the government could change, whether it's amber watch or whatever, within days.
Absolutely. The good news over the last couple of days is that infection rates in the UK have declined significantly, but, we're travelling to Europe. They're increasing in some countries. I think people have reached a point where it's a calculated gamble. And for many people, they're prepared to take that risk. Children at home for 6 weeks during the summer holidays is going to test the nerves of many. And I think we will see travel, but we've got to have more confidence and clarity. And Mr. Shapps, the Transport Minister, has finally got to become a stronger advocate for aviation.
OK, John, good to talk to you. Thank you for your time, John Grant. And just to say, later here on the BBC, we will be talking to the Chief Financial Officer of Ryanair. That is in around about half an hour's time. So if you're interested, do tune in to us then. Now, staying with UK news, the country's economy is facing a pingdemic where workers notified by NHS Track and Trace app have to self-isolate due to being in contact with someone who's tested positive for COVID. So in the week ending on the 14th of July, 600,000 people were sent alerts and asked to self-isolate. Supply firms have been complaining they're struggling to keep supermarkets stocked with food. In response, on Sunday, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs said it's identified 500 sites for daily contact testing. And some 10,000 supermarket depot workers in England will be exempt from quarantine rules, and this will include forklift drivers and dispatchers. However, supermarket workers are not included. Well, let's talk this through with Justin Urquhart-Stewart. He's a were of the investment firm Regionally. Good to see you again, Justin. I understand were you pinged and that's why you're stuck at home?
I am. That's it. I was having just had all my tests. Obviously, I had my jab some time ago. Do you think I'd be completely clear? No, get pinged again. And so another 10 days being locked down, which is incredibly frustrating. And of course, mine is just a personal issue. Now roll that out across the country, and you can see why the economy isn't not grinding to a halt, but very, very severely hampered. All the key elements of logistics is now being stopped, and merely by increasing lorry hours and things like that, lorry drivers' hours, I'm afraid is not the answer to this. I'm afraid this has now turned into a structural emergency, which actually needs more dynamic action by the government.
Yeah, I mean, so many are frustrated by this, and we've got, you know, on the one hand, you've got industries calling for workers to be released from the self-isolation rules. But then also on the other hand, you've got unions who are saying for those who are seen now as exempt, they do have a right to stay at home if they wish to.
Well, they may have a right to do so, but we need an obligation to keep the economy going. Because otherwise, I'm afraid we get hurt that way around. There's an awful balance here. We still don't know the impact of the full impact of the pandemic in terms of actually can we get the rest of the country jabbed properly, assuming that's they're willing to, particularly the younger group coming through. And we're going through this risk at the moment. The rest of the world is watching us as we've released the economy more. But now we've seen the numbers going up. Hopefully, we're beginning to see them come down a little bit now, but too early to tell. So in the meantime, we need to make sure, though, the function, the blood of the economy starts pumping around the body. If you stop doing that, then you'll end up with a coronary.
Indeed. We shall keep a close eye. Justin, nice to see you. Thanks for being on the programme. Justin Urquhart-Stewart there from Regionally. Now, after thousands turned out for anti-lockdown protests in Sydney, Australia over the weekend, calls have grown louder for more government support for businesses in the city. So far, unions, the opposition party and business leaders have called on the federal government to reintroduce wage subsidies as Sydney's lockdown approaches its 5th week. Our reporter Katie Silver has more details on this story.
We're seeing lockdowns there end, restart, which is making it so difficult for businesses. I heard, for example, earlier today, restaurants don't know what to do. The ski season normally attracts a great deal of tourism. And as a result, we're hearing these calls, as you mentioned, from far and wide. So we heard, for example, from the opposition leader this morning, and he said basically that the Australian Prime Minister declared Mission Impossible solved prematurely. That was that Australia thought it was through the COVID pandemic, ended these sorts of wage subsidies, and that maybe that was too soon. We've also heard from the State Treasurer, the Treasurer of the State of New South Wales, where Sydney is located. And he said that when New South Wales goes well, the country goes well. And that's because, of course, Sydney is by far the country's most populous city, as well as the fact that so many people live within Sydney, as well as in the greater region. So what was so successful at helping Australia weather the storm when it came to the economic impact of COVID was a scheme known as JobKeeper. And last year, for example, at its height, employees could receive in the order of about 1,500 Australian dollars, or roughly $1,200 US every fortnight. And as a result, we saw, for example, Australia virtually continuing its decades of consistent economic growth, basically dipping into a very brief technical recession, but that ended. But now, as the number of COVID cases seems consistent, about 150 every day in Sydney, this situation does not seem to be improving, which is really putting a strain on business.
It's a problem all over, isn't it? The strain businesses are feeling because of the global pandemic. Let's bring you some other business stories. China has unveiled a sweeping overhaul of its $100 billion education tech sector, banning companies that teach the school curriculum from making profits, raising capital or going public. Beijing on Saturday published regulations that together threaten to break up the sector and jeopardise billions of dollars in foreign investment. And China's state-owned nuclear energy company could be blocked from all future power projects in the UK, with ministers understood to be investigating ways to prevent its involvement, according to the Financial Times. The move would exclude China General Nuclear from the consortium plan to build the £20 billion Sizewell C nuclear plant on the Suffolk coast in England. And one of those stories that I've just mentioned about education and technology companies that provide education in China facing new regulations, that's what pulled down stocks today in Asia. You can see Hong Kong particularly badly affected. Many big tech stocks listed in Hong Kong saw serious declines. Japan slightly insulated from that story. You can see up 1% at the close, but also in mainland China, the blue chip stocks there down over 2%, their lowest for some 10 months because of concern about greater regulation on the part of the Chinese authorities on tech companies. You're now up to date on all the latest business news.